Hello, I'm Tom Rogers and this is the Rebel Education Podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Rebel Education Podcast. This episode is all about the role of continuous professional development, what it is, how it's used in schools, what constitutes good professional development, and what not so good professional development for teachers. And above all, why CPD can be so transformative and so helpful when it comes to developing and maintaining teacher well-being. My special guest on this podcast is Bukky Yusuf. Bukky, do you want to say hello?
Hello, hi there.
Hi Bukky, it is a pleasure to be joined by your good self on this wonderful Saturday for my podcast. I firstly want to say thank you so much for giving up the time to speak to me on the Rebel Education Podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me, actually.
Thank you very much. And really, I just wanted to start by asking you to introduce yourself, your background, and how you managed to get into teaching and why you took that avenue.
Okay, so I've been teaching for over 2 decades. When I say that, it makes me groan a little bit, thinking, oh my God, that's ages. My background is in science. I'm a secondary science teacher. I have had a variety of different roles during that time, including educational consultancy, a number of different senior leadership roles, and more recently, which is unusual in my career trajectory, middle leadership roles. In being a head of department. So presently I work in a special school and I'm a senior leader in charge of the teaching and learning and curriculum aspects, and also in supporting the development within science. Now, what got me into teaching in the first place was quite unusual because I've always loved science, and my sister doesn't. She hated it. And when I was talking to her about a month before her GCSEs, how you doing? She said, I hate science and I'm at a grade G. So I actually did a little bit of teaching with her for a little bit. And she managed to move her grade in a short space of time from a grade G at the time to a grade F.
Wow.
And that basically introduced my first love of teaching and realizing, you know what, I can maybe do something with this. And that, as I say, the rest is history.
And why science in particular?
Oh, I think it was probably linked to my teachers. When I did, when I was at school, I had a love of science in English. And I wanted to, at one point, I think everyone wants to be like a doctor, except I can't stand the sight of blood, so that was out of the way. But by then, I developed my, real interest when I did my A-levels. I did A-levels in biology, chemistry, and physics. And I loved it. I found it hard, but I found that I really did enjoy the different aspects of science. And since then, it's just, I suppose, been part of my mission to make a lot of students find that there are some different elements in science that they can actually enjoy beyond the initial I hate science. I get that, but it's making them look at the awe and wonder of it as well.
Well, that was going to be my next question, actually. Why do you think we struggle so much to get people to I suppose not only enjoy science but move into science-based roles? Why do you think we struggle a bit more with that in the UK?
I think it starts off from, your experience in school. In some cases, it's a generalization, but science is a practical subject, yet sometimes you don't get to do a lot of practicals for a variety of different reasons. And it could be due to the shortage of teachers. You may have cover teachers and things like that. I think it's relevance and seeing a need. And, there are a variety of different things out there that, immediately gains a lot of people's interest. So I would say that they're my initial thoughts about why many people don't necessarily want to go into sciences. It stems from their own, experiences at school.
Yeah.
And go.
Because I'll be honest, I didn't like science. Mind you, I didn't really like much Bukkys at school, but I didn't like science. I found it. I just found it boring, but also I was quite intimidated by the practical element of it.
What made it intimidating though, Tom?
Just bunsen burners, Bukky, and just stuff blowing up and having to. I'm really I think there's something wrong with me because I'm just so like paranoid about something blowing up, or like I don't know, even like changing a light bulb getting electrocuted, stuff like that.
Right.
And I think as a kid, it just I just like I like the idea of kind of making notes and kind of working in silence, and I loved English and I loved history and I loved anything that was kind of a bit more practical and outside the box. I personally was a bit out of my comfort zone a little bit more, I think. That's one reason, but also I think to be a really good science teacher, you've got to have such a big skill set. I mean, when you're doing practical experiments, I just think there's another level to classroom management. There's another whole level to it. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, managing that aspect is a skill. You're right in that regard. But it can be done from different ways. You could teach a practical by, demonstrating it. But this is where, for example, tech comes in really useful, in the fact that you could, use tech, like an iPad or even visualizers just to show what's actually going on in the reactions and things like that, the whole class can actually see. But then you think about, okay, what type of questions would you ask them? You could ask them questions about, what are you changing? What are you made? All kinds of things like that. So, yeah, you're right. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why some are not so keen to do practicals. I will be honest and say there are some particular practicals that really terrify me, and that's because of the fact that when I had, as part of my degree, I spent a year in a research lab, which I loved. But then there was one particular practical where they said that you've got to be extremely careful because, you had like these nitrogen-based compounds, and if you don't get the reaction mixtures correct, it will blow up. And if the glassware is cracked a little bit, then it'll blow up. And I don't know if it was real or just they were just saying that just to tease me. But my fear was instilled at that point, and I've never moved beyond it. So even things, say, like methane bubble reactions, where it's a very safe practical to do, and it's a great way to infuse students, I'm too scared to do that. So I often get other people, like maybe like the senior technicians or someone who's more confident in my department, to say, look, would you mind doing this in my class, please, as I just watch you?
Yeah.
So I think it's what you feel most comfortable with.
Definitely. And everyone's different, and we know that. But we also know that from a kind of economic standpoint and everything else, it's obviously going to benefit the country if we can get more students to engage with STEM subjects. We know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So really the theme of this podcast is all about continuous professional development, and I thought we'd maybe start with your ideas, my ideas. We can feed it in terms of what CPD is, but particularly what good and not so good CPD is. Do you want to kick off that conversation?
I would summarize CPD, because it's continuing, the emphasis on continuing professional development. I would underline that in bold, exclamation mark. It's got to be anything that enables us to improve our teaching practice and have some impact upon the students that we actually teach. That, in essence, is what it should actually do. So good CPD should also therefore allow you to reflect on your practice. There should be options available. One of the things that I don't like is the fact that, we've all got different training needs, but you have a one-size-fits-all, like inset that everyone has to, undertake, whether it actually suits your development points or not. If it's good, though, it will engage staff and they'll see it's relevant. And if you give people choice, where I've seen some really good CPD being implemented, they may have done, say, like, for example, learning walks or observations. And so the whole staff are identified, but then there are different aspects we need to develop. And you have training options that allow you to choose what's relevant for you and chart your progress against that. It's got to be revisited. So there's no point in actually having, even if it's excellent CPD, it's like a one-hit wonder and no one ever says anything about it. It's almost like a tick box exercise. You've got to have a chance to revisit it just to see, how am I developing since this, my starting point
Yeah.
or the baseline, and what else do I need to actually move on with and develop? And I think that if there's time devoted during the training episode, however it happens, to practice an element that you're then going to implement within your class, that's very powerful.
I agree. I think the key word from everything you're saying to me that's coming through is impact. And I think CPD has to have impact, doesn't it, in the longer term?
Yeah. Yes.
That's not to say that if you attend, in my opinion, if you attend, for example, a day of CPD somewhere, that could still have a significant impact, because you may get an idea or some kind of something from it that you require no further support to implement, that you can actually just go back to your school and implement yourself, and it has an impact on student outcomes. Okay, I mean,
absolutely, that's true.
So people who say kind of dismiss the one-day CPD event as a kind of faddy event, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's a tendency to look at one-off events and say, well, it's a one-off event. There's no follow-up from it. There's no legacy. There's no impact, continuous impact. But there could be. Obviously, ideal scenario, you have your one-day event, and then following the one-day event, somebody comes into your school, works with you, coaches you, you have some further discussions, and you actually test out in practice what you've learned. But obviously, for financial reasons or time constraints or whatever, that might not be possible. So I think I agree with you. It's about impact, and also for me, it's about in lesson. It's as close to what happens in the classroom as possible. That to me is good professional development. What can be applied? To me, the less effective CPD that I've been to has maybe been too generic, or it's not been actionable. It's been too. Now, obviously, I think theory and philosophy has a place. Of course, it does.
Yes, of course.
Of course, it does. But I think there has to be a mixture. There has to be a mixture between the philosophy and the theory and the actual actionable strategies and product. And sometimes, for me, the less quality CPD has been the one that has aired on the former, the philosophy and theory, with less on the specific, non-generic actions that I can implement. Do you know what I mean?
And I think also some of the ones I'm just thinking back to some of the CPD events I've been to where it's quite dry in terms of, you have the person who is reading word for word from the PowerPoint. I went to something in the last 18 months in which I experienced that. I just thought, you've got to be kidding me. Yeah. Really? So, you've got to have confidence that whoever's delivering it actually cares about what they're doing. But I think you've got to personalize it to your audience, to the school, to the institution. Some of the best, again, one great practice is with one lady who provided training for me as a consultant. And what she did, she sent out a little questionnaire, nothing too onerous, just to find out what our development points were, so that she then tailored it specifically to what we needed during the day.
Yeah.
Very purposeful. And she did some follow-up aspects again. And it wasn't anything too onerous. It was just, a few emails with a few questions where you saw and felt that this person really understands what we're trying to do and is invested in it as well. So you'll take those developments more seriously, I feel.
For sure. I completely agree with that. Which brings me on nicely, really, to the next question, which is about there's been a bit of a debate about weekend or Saturday CPD. I know that Deborah Kidd stopped doing Northern Rocks on a Saturday because of this debate, and the debate really goes along the lines of a Saturday CPD event. Putting events on Saturdays is almost forcing teachers to give up a day of their weekend when those CPD days should be provided by the school and funded by the school, because obviously teachers are paying for it out of their own pocket. So therefore, by cancelling the Saturday events or not running them, it forces the schools to actually take action and to actually take CPD seriously and put the correct budgets in place. The flip side of that, of course, is the counter argument, which is that it's teacher choice. Devil's advocate would say, well, hang on a minute, what about a teacher with a family who can't go on a Saturday because they have childcare issues and they just simply cannot give up a day of their weekend to go? Does it favour the young single teacher, the Saturday CPD event? Does it favour the teacher with more time? And is that then fair? This is obviously playing devil's advocate, because personally for me, I'm very much in favour of it. But I was wondering what you thought.
Personally speaking, I am in favour of Saturday CPDs, not weekend per se, because if it goes into my Sunday, and I'm like, no way, mate, I need some time I need some downtime for sure before I go back into school.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that the popularity generally of Saturday CPDs shows that this is something that is of interest to a number of educators. I think it provides choice, but I also I agree what you're saying about the fact that if you have responsibilities, be it with families or commitments, and you can't go, then you are missing out. And as an EdTech enthusiast, I always add this in. What we could do is, like maybe think outside the box and think, okay, how else could we enable people who cannot be with us in real life to still participate? And I'll give an example of one event that I went to recently where I had a commitment in the morning because I had to go to another event in the morning. But there was one particular session I really wanted to see, just to get a sense about what it was about and follow it up. So I asked one of the organisers if they could use the Periscope app just to, live stream the session so I could at least catch aspects of it before I actually arrived in the afternoon at the event. But that I still felt as though I was being included in it. I was obviously still able to participate. Oh, nice. So I think that we've got to think about options and thinking, if there's an interest and a need, because again, it's about professional development. How else could we facilitate Saturday events for those who are interested, but for whatever reason they can't actually attend?
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously got a stake in this because all the Teach Me Icons events that we run are Saturday based. So I'm probably biased in my approach, but I would say, yes, we streamed the whole of TM History Icons via YouTube.
Right.
And so the whole thing was either on Periscope or YouTube. Periscope in 2018 and YouTube 2019. And I must say the feedback we had from that was that people who watched it via the stream really got a lot out of it. They did feel like they were part of the event. They were able to benefit. And the fact that you've streamed it then means that everything can then be recorded and then look back on later on when people perhaps who were at the event were distracted or whatever, when they actually, or when, had to go to the toilet or whatever it was and missed part of the speech. You've got everything down there.
Yes.
And I do think there's a massive benefit, and I think bringing tech into the events on the weekend events is massive, and I think that's really the way forward for CPD providers who are looking at the Saturday events. Obviously, there's different types of events. I know that you have, I believe that you've been to some BrewEd events.
Yes, I have been. Yes, I've been to about 2.
Yeah, I've been to one. I've been to one in Brighton. I think they're excellent. I think they're very different from some of the, for example, if you were to compare a BrewEd event to a Research Ed event. Have you been to any Research Ed events?
No, not yet, no.
Yeah, so I think if you compare those two, they're probably like chalk and cheese, but they probably provide something quite different. Some events are more informal, some events are more formal. There's just different formats. And both of them absolutely have their place, in my opinion, because, for example, a BrewEd event, I think there's another element dynamic to it, which is the networking and the making friends. And I think that's something that quite often we forget, because if you're having a Saturday CPD event, teaching can be a bloody lonely job,
True.
And being able to go there, meet people who think the same way you do the same things that you do, maybe have the same value systems and the same kind of approach that you do, broadly speaking, that can be incredibly valuable to a teacher who's very much alone and working all the hours that God gives. Do you know what I mean?
True, I agree. And it also adds to the positive elements of education within the UK, because let's face it, I can understand why schools may not be able to provide quality CPD in a way in which they desire, because we don't have the funds. Yeah. So, getting people, I think, moving beyond the 4 walls of their own schools and connecting with others, establishing rapport, I always think is a positive thing, because you can, so long as you're motivated and you're keen to learn, you will always get something, no matter whether it's an informal or formal setup.
Totally agree. I was just going to ask you, and again, we've already touched on this a little bit, but I know that you've attended a lot of different events. You've also been involved in a lot of different CPD projects within your places of work. What's the best CPD that you've personally experienced?
I knew you were going to ask me this question. If I recall more recently, I'll mention a number of ones. So I went to Cog Science event that took place during the May half term for the very first time this year, and it was incredible, I have to say, in terms of the organisation, the setup, the different types of science and aspects that were actually being presented. It was just really informative and well planned, and it was great. I liked it because obviously it enabled me to actually connect with people that teach the same subject as myself, which I don't always have necessarily. So that was great. A more informal one, you've mentioned about Brewed Salsa. Now, Brewed Salsa, which took place in Sheffield in April, was enormous fun. So obviously it's a more informal setup, but I think what was great was the fact that we were all learning from each other in a trusted environment. And when you have people talking from the heart, that's something I love, because the authenticity is there. You're more keen to listen. You know, you want to be part of the network, and it allows you to come back and keep asking questions. And Teach Meet Hackney and the one at Forest Gate Community School, those two took place within about 2 weeks of each other. But I loved it because you had teachers who stood up and shared within about 5 to 10 minutes what they do in their regular lessons and sharing it with different members of the community. It was great. So I love those type of things. I love the variety, but I think at the end of the day, so long as I can learn something from it that I can take back and use, it's all good.
I totally agree with you. So for me, it would be TM History Icons probably, and especially the last 2 years, the events have been superb, and I'm not just saying that because I'm part of organising it. They genuinely have been awesome. The Brewhead Brighton, really enjoyed that one last year. Just thought that was a great atmosphere. Learned a lot from it. That was brilliant, and I think some of the stuff I've done in school, like peer coaching, when I was last working in the UK. In my last school in the UK, they implemented a peer coaching model. I was paired up with someone on SLT, and we basically went into each other's lessons over a period of time. Had some really good coaching conversations after the lessons, and I got quite a lot out of that. I suppose the only negative of that is the amount of time you have and the amount of time you can dedicate. But in terms of the actual process, I got a lot out of that, and it's something I'm really interested in looking at. In my future roles, whether that be in my current school or future schools, is looking at how you effectively implement that kind of peer coaching, because I think that's going to be the future really in terms of CPD in school, is how we connect teachers, how we use social media within the school, but also within those networks of teachers, how we use technology to connect them together. I know a massive, for me in 2008, I had myself filmed teaching. So this was only when I've been teaching for a year. So I was at the end of my NQT year, and I've had a whole lesson filmed. I'm not going to post it on Twitter, Bukky, because
that must have been quite something.
It was interesting. I wouldn't want to look at it now because I probably want to go and throw up somewhere. To be honest, because it'd just be so cringeworthy. Because I can't remember, but I think I got into the habit of using the word folks. So it was like a folks machine gun, it was like folks. Also, there were other habits like okay. I think I was saying okay too much. I can't remember. I haven't watched it for ages. I'll be honest with you, Bukky. My grandmother has stolen it from me. It's the only copy of the DVD because it's an old school DVD. I don't have a digital copy, and it's sat in her house. She was like, "I'm keeping this." I was like, "Feel free. You can keep it. You can watch it as many times as you want." Because it saves me from having to find it and dig out and say, let's look at it. But that helped me a lot at the time, I remember, because I was like, let's review this. Let's see what I can learn from this. And I think it's still the same now. If you can get yourself filmed teaching just for yourself, and I think it has to come again from the teacher themselves, you know, taking ownership of their own professional development. I think that can have a massive impact, you know.
Yeah, and following on from that, what I've done before in the past is actually, if I wanted to focus upon what I've said and how I've maybe like introduced the lesson or, you know, like transition from one activity to another, or at the end of the lesson, I just simply did a voice record. Yeah. And again, you know, like you pick up things that you don't realize you say a lot. Yeah. Like I say okay a lot and, you know, guys and what have you. So, but it's really helped me to focus upon the specifics so that you can make sure that you can actually do it. But again, it's I think the importance is actually taking ownership of your own learning, you know, is underrated. And it should be something that's actually built into any of, you know, like the follow-ups from lesson observations and learning walks where specific practices have been identified that needs to be improved upon. It's actually making sure that teachers, you know, developments are being done with teachers rather than to, because the power, you know, like, for example, if we take ownership, that's so motivating. Yeah. But also the fact that if we can meaningfully learn from each other as well, that is such an enriching experience. So again, it's just thinking outside the box.
Totally, absolutely, and I suppose really for me as well, social media has played a massive role for me in terms of my own professional development, being able to access CPD through something like Twitter, and I was going to ask you, are there any particular accounts or are there any particular social media outlets that you feel have really benefited you or you feel that could benefit others with high quality CPD? I know there's loads, but if you had to pick maybe two or three accounts or 2 or 3 websites that you would have a look at.
They would be, that's a difficult one because, I mean, I am an ambassador for, say, Leadership Matters, and a lot of what they produce is high quality, for example.
Agreed.
My coach who is, you know, one of my coaches is Diana Osagi, who is an international educational consultant.
Yeah.
You know, she posts, for example, on LinkedIn is informative. Yes. She posts via Twitter is informative. Even the webinars that she's posted as part of an organization really can move your learning forward and in terms of professional development. I think it's hard to summarize, but it's difficult to quantify how good the professional development, you know, through social media platforms could be. Definitely. Because, you know, what may be great for me, you might just think, oh, well, you know, that's not really relevant or not meaningful or what have you. So I think it's down to a personal choice. And
also, wouldn't you add as well that it's an open forum? So there's no, and by the way, I'm incredibly liberal in terms of the content that I consume. I like to engage with as much as possible and to see things in as much as possible I can use or that I can learn from. However, there is no quality filter on social media. There is no, you know, it is an open forum marketplace, which is its biggest strength, but also something to be aware of if you're looking for, how would you say, evidence-based practice or something that's research informed. I don't know. That would be my question mark over it. Is how we do that.
So what I would therefore do is I'd actually approach people, you know, in the virtual sense and saying, you know, like I'm looking for something that will enhance, for example, my coaching skills or enhance how I implement, you know, practicals within my science lessons. You know, who would you suggest is good or which organisation or which websites would you suggest I actually look at and take it from there? So I suppose you just tap into your networks to see what they think works best, or organizations that you might be, you know, be part of to see what they actually share, you know, as potential avenues of actually learning and developing.
Definitely. I think for me, just a few things from Twitter for me. One of the things I've seen recently, which I thought was really good, Ben Gordon, who's a maths teacher on Twitter, he shared with me it was kind of a CPD marketplace where the staff within his school, he's an assistant head teacher for teaching and learning, they can almost like choose where they want to go, the angle they want to take, and he gives them different options to explore, and he presents them resources that they can use and implement to reach those goals within the framework that he gives.
Okay.
There's one example of where I've seen something on Twitter, seen an account, seen something, I've got in contact with him directly and I've said, can I have a copy? And he's given me a copy, and it's really high quality stuff and really useful for me in terms of implementation. And that's where I think Twitter can be super useful, and social media can be super useful.
Yeah, Twitter's also very useful in sharing lots of resources and ideas. You know, what I love about it is the fact that someone might post an image or a short vlog or, you know, something, an excerpt just to show, look, this is what I've tried, this is what I've done in my school, this is the impact I've actually had on the students, and freely sharing it, which is great, you know. So I think it just depends on what you're actually looking for. And some people, they don't want the evidence. They just want something that, you know, looks interesting, that they're willing to try out. And, you know, just see, does it suit their particular practice? Would it suit the learning needs of their children? So, you know, there's a variety of things that you say that's out there that, you know, but I like social media in you know, like connecting with educators, because you have such a variety out there and it's so diverse, and I think there's pretty much something that suits everyone's needs. Agreed.
So I think that's all for now, really, in terms of this podcast. It's been absolutely brilliant chatting with you about continue your background in teaching, and I suppose we could leave it, Bukky, with just one piece of advice from you for any teacher who wants to continue with their professional development. What would you say to them? What piece of advice would you give them in terms of moving forward with their professional development?
Just be open to learning. I think you need to, with the feedback you get, look at what is meaningful and useful for yourself as a practitioner, and that would have the greatest impact upon your students, and be open to learning from sources that you may not actually be receptive to in the first place. So, for example, you know, there might be some strategies you think, oh my God, no, that would never work with my students. But it could still work. I just think you have to remain receptive and open to learning and developing.
Open-minded as well. I totally agree. I totally agree with that. Don't dismiss. You know, have a look at it. Maybe try it. Try, refine, ditch, I think is what Amjad Ali sometimes says.
Absolutely.
Try, refine, ditch. Don't dismiss. Have a look at it. Take it on board. If it doesn't work, bin it. If it does work, it's benefited your students, you know. And I love that, being open to learn. Take I suppose my tip as well would be I think teachers find this one really difficult, and I understand why, is being able to take feedback and really take it on board and action it, because sometimes I think as teachers we put so much effort in, we dedicate so much time, that sometimes when we get feedback that's critical, it's quite hard to hear, but that is part of CPD. That is such a crucial part of CPD.
It is, and I think also trusting that if you know, I mean, obviously there's different types of feedback, but I think what's good is, I mean, there's always good in something. So it's actually finding, you know, like, what does this actually mean for me that I need to be changing? You know, is this a worthwhile investment of my time? And ultimately, if it goes back to your pedagogical practice, what impact will it have on your students? Because some of the toughest feedback I've actually had, I thought, oh my God, you know, it pretty much knocks you off your feet. But when you come back and you think, right, okay, so how, you know, this is obviously something I need to act on. How can I make it work? The payback in terms of the impact upon your students is great. So yeah, it's sometimes just spicing the bullet a little bit and trying to distance yourself from any of the initial reactions which may stop you from actually moving forward.
Yeah, that's so true. Bukky, that's been amazing. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so.
This has been the Rebel Education Podcast. You can download this podcast via Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, or even YouTube. You can listen to it on YouTube. We're going to be back very soon, a couple of days actually, with a podcast with Pete Sanderson, the amazing Pete Sanderson, talking about behaviour for learning in schools. So that's going to be really exciting. Have a wonderful weekend or week, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, and I will catch you next time. Say bye, Bukky.
Bye.
See you, everybody. Thank you. Bye.